trial of Richard Allen continues on in Delphi, Indiana. Is he the man who killed those two little girls, Abby Williams and Libby German, back in 2017 near the Monon High Bridge, where everybody likes to walk out in that part of the country? We've heard a lot of very interesting testimony, including confessions from Richard Allen. Joining me to discuss, Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. We don't have the option of listening to the confessions, but people in the courtroom just the other day did. They heard the phone call to his mother and to his wife in a very weird way, I guess I would say, confessed to the murders. Not at all what he said initially when questioned by investigators, but after, I'm going to call it what it is, torture in the solitary confinement, after torture, mocking and stuff by guards, things that really should not be going on in a U.S. prison, but have. He finally said, "I did it. I did it." But is there any weight to the credibility of that? Jennifer, what's your thoughts on where this is at right now?
Well, I feel like I'm on a teeter-totter,
Yeah,
and it's not moving.
we're kind of
Not
stuck in the
moving
middle.
down, it's not moving up.
Yeah,
And it's interesting because almost nothing has changed really,
no,
since even before trial.
no.
I mean, here we have what is the evidence against Richard Allen? He said he's there. Well, we've known that since 2017. He said he's there again in other, interviews. So we know he's there,
Hmm.
but he's not there at the crime scene. He's there at the Monon High Bridge,
Hmm.
which is not where those girls were murdered.
Yeah.
So there's a differentiation, but certainly he was there. The car, there's been a PT Cruiser described, there's been a smart car described, there's been a SUV described. He had a Ford Focus, I believe.
Hmm.
So his car was never identified as being there. As far as eyewitness identification regarding him exactly, there are more uh, eyewitness. In other words, no one can say Richard Allen.
Yeah.
The descriptions are just all over the board, just like the two photos that we
Mhm.
saw initially, and just like the fact nobody can seem to say whether the guy on video is Richard Allen or someone else. It's kind of the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Some people see and say, yes, I remember years ago when they said a specialist came in and said he's 6 foot to 6'1". Now we're seeing specialists say 5'6", and then you notice nothing was brought in about those details because it's just not a science
Yeah.
um, regarding that video. So here we are. We have these confessions, but in my opinion, they're tainted. They're tainted because of the zealousness of the defense, or I'm sorry, of the prosecutor's office and of law enforcement to put him in a maximum security confinement instead of just saying, yeah, put him in the Carroll County Jail. The jail is open, it's got the bars, he can see people, he can have a pad, he can communicate. If he would have said that under less horrible, circumstances and conditions, I would be much more inclined to believe what he said. Also, they're all over the place. Even the early ones now we're seeing um, where we understand now a lot more of wiping feces on the wall, drinking or washing his face in toilet water, banging his head against the wall. Some people say it's for show. um, it, I don't know. That's a lot of show, and it's gone on for a long period of time. We also know now he was drugged involuntarily, to get him under control. uh, that's just a lot to trust what comes out of somebody's mouth in that circumstance.
Well, I mean, if we just break this down for a moment and take the crime out of it, take just a random person, take a random person, put them in solitary confinement for a year, subject them to everything that you just listed, and then would you believe anything that person says? You know,
Well, you know, it's it's truly um, just the most. I mean, if people can picture the cells, just the size of those cells, I think they said very specifically. correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were 6 by 12.
Yeah, it was like a closet, basically. It's like going into a closet and spending a year there.
You have one mat, right, to lay on that would be so uncomfortable.
Mhm.
You have three sides that are solid and one side that's almost solid with a sliver of light.
Yeah.
And you're there. They decide when the lights are on, when the lights are off, and you have nothing
Yeah.
but you. I think certainly conditions like that can lead to madness. I thought was what was really interesting were a couple of things. One was the first interviews when he was talked to out of confinement and how adamant he was. And he acted, in my opinion, as an investigator, how I expect somebody who is innocent to act.
Mhm.
They're usually very defiant. They're angry. Go ahead and look. You're not going to find
Yeah.
anything, and so a lot of his, and again, unfortunately, we didn't get to see the interrogation. Recall that recall that the interviews that were conducted during this time were all copied over. So
Yeah.
we don't
Just
have
happened to
any
be, just accidentally. We have this major
all of
case
them.
in our very small town, and we're accidentally losing all the evidence.
It's all gone, copied over. The
Yeah.
Miranda, that's not even recorded. It's very, as a law enforcement officer, it's just hard to. You don't want a Monday morning quarterback, but this one's a jaw dropper. People think Karen Reed is a jaw dropper. No, this is a jaw dropper.
E
Having said that, do
Yeah.
they have the right guy? I I
Yeah.
I don't know. They mention a van, right? He mentions a van in one of the confessions,
Yeah.
and the law enforcement is able to corroborate a van. But then, was that van mentioned before? Yes. Was the van known to Dr. Walla? Dr. Walla is a big piece in this, and Dr. Walla has put herself out there as a total embarrassment by being involved in communities on social media and finding out all sorts of clues and interacting with social media sleuths. And then yet she is supposed to be an impartial interviewer and psychologist for Richard Allen. It's really
I
mind blowing.
I think what we're seeing a lot here is a culture within the law enforcement community and anybody involved in that community of me. Me, me, me. I'm going to do whatever I can to benefit myself in whatever situation I'm in. If I screwed something up, well, I'm going to cover that up. If I did this or that, I'm going to cover that up. Let's keep covering this up. Let's keep acting inappropriately, and somebody will cover for all of our bad acts. That seems to be what we have going on here, like all the way down to the psychologists who were like, maybe this person can provide some credible information, but even they are corrupt and twisted in this whole thing. It just seems to be a very bizarre culture of we are going to force the narrative of what we think is right down everybody's throats, and for the most part, I'm guessing it's worked. Otherwise, they wouldn't continue to do it. But they got a lot of backlash on this one, and some people dragging their feet, going, "Yeah, I don't think so." And I don't think they're accustomed to that there in Delphi. This amount of not smooth sailing when they think they know what is right and want to punish those that they deem to be wrong and evildoers without a fair trial.
Well, I want to say first of all, again, I'm a blue blood. I'm blue to the core. 28 years in law enforcement, and I I, I can tell you that most law enforcement officers, a huge amount, 90%,
Mhm.
are amazing.
Sure.
They're what they, their decisions, everything they're doing, they are driven by good
Hmm.
and trying to do the right thing. I think in this case, there was just so much incompetence. First of all, the bodies, as you know, were not found by law enforcement. They were found by searchers that were helping to look. And then law enforcement, happened upon the scene. This is something, Delphi is so small. They're law enforcement presence is so small. And they had never had anything like this. It wasn't properly secured, that scene. Evidence wasn't properly collected. The state police get involved. A month later, the Bureau gets involved. Then they're basically removed,
Yeah.
within a couple of years. It's just so poorly handled. Like any case, the most important time is the initial finding of those bodies and securing it, keeping everyone out. I mean, we should have had footprint impressions of the killer. We
Yeah.
didn't have any of that. Why? The whole crime scene was trampled.
Yeah.
There's pieces of evidence that were found, a belt that was found, a green sash that was found that was supposedly not processed, the quote unquote rune or the hand mark we think now, right, of Libby on the tree. It took forever to process that. The branches that were laid over top of them weren't taken into evidence right at that moment.
Hmm.
Photographs weren't taken of that bullet. Where was that bullet really found? There's
Yeah.
just so much that was done wrong in that crime scene evaluation early on, that I think that's why we're in a mess we are right now, at least for somebody like me looking at it
Yeah.
hard. But
I'm,
they're feeding
yeah.
that jury. I don't know.
I am, I don't know why I'm shocked, but I am a bit. I was thinking maybe once this thing starts, there's going to be a bit more competency going on here in terms of law enforcement and the investigation. Is there's just facts we didn't know about, is what I was thinking. More things will come out in court, and it'll make a lot more sense. There's just things that they can't reveal right now. That doesn't appear to be the case. It actually appears to be more incompetency than we actually ever expected. Let's talk about the FBI, who did step in. They wanted to help. They offered their services, and Delphi said, "Nah, we're good." I mean, it reminds me of like kids, and like parent knocks on the door. Hey, we want to check out what's going on in there. Everything's fine, mom. It's good. Go away. Go away. And then eventually mom goes away. And then, somebody tries to cover up whatever they did. Mom eventually figures it out, or mom's just never allowed back in the room. That's what it feels like with this whole FBI thing. Like, why would you turn down the resources of the FBI if your goal is to figure out what happened here and get justice for these kids? Resources that you don't have in Delphi, but resources that could potentially take a look at your investigation and go, why did you or did you not do these things? This is like just investigation 101. What's your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the FBI, right, they came in March, so about a month later. And the problem was, if you will, for Delphi, is the FBI put together a probable cause affidavit, and they very much believe Ron Logan, who was the owner of that property where they were murdered, that he very much was responsible for this. And the affidavit is pretty compelling, but it was so late into the game when they searched his residence, there wasn't much there to find, as you can
Hmm.
imagine, a month later. Um, so it's very interesting that I think ideologically, between the Bureau and the locals, they did not have the same belief in terms of investigative, where the investigation should go. And at the end of the day, the Bureau, the FBI, has absolutely no venue
Yeah.
in this case unless there was public corruption. And again, public corruption mimics
Yeah.
incompetence. And I really think this was incompetence that turned to embarrassment. And
Yeah.
and so the you know
It kind of leads to my next question about Ron Logan. I mean, I'm just asking you to speculate here. Is there any connection with Ron Logan to law enforcement, or any reason why anyone would want to protect Ron Logan from exposure to this crime? If in fact, if he was responsible for it in some way, shape, or form, we know he's dead now, obviously, but was there any reason to not go into looking at Ron further from the local Delphi official standpoint?
I mean, you ask a great question. I have never seen any link between Ron Logan and law enforcement or anybody as to why they wouldn't want to move forward against him. But it really does beg that question. local law enforcement said at the time was, well, he was just too old to commit this crime. But Tony, older gentlemen have a lot of, or can have a lot of the same sexual drive. And remember, this really isn't about sex. This is about power. This is about control. This is about a deviant behavior toward children.
Yeah.
That's what really this is all about. And my big question is, if um, Richard Allen were this huge deviant, such a deviant that he could do the acts that we now know about, where is all the pornographic evidence and the sadistic evidence on his 20 plus phones that were seized? I understand that the one apparently from 2017 is purportedly missing. A phone isn't missing. Where was the evidence from the carrier? Why didn't they put them on the stand and say, listen, he turned the phone in. This is what happened. Where is all of that?
Yeah.
I didn't see that. Yeah, I either missed it or it didn't happen. I have to say, this has been the most frustrating situation because the reporting, there's so many there, so many on social media reporting, so much hodgepodge, I call it. Like one minute I look and this person's saying this, and this person's
Yeah.
this, and this person's this, and then everybody has their own agenda.
Yeah.
So I feel like some of the local reporters, I think, are doing a really good job just being more fact based,
Hmm.
but it's hours and hours and hours of testimony. So for us out here in the public, it's just so hard to decipher truth, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing it through everybody's prism and perspective of that case. This is all you get when you don't have cameras or audio or anything in the courtroom. Keegan Klein, obviously, another person who raised a lot of eyebrows, considering he was communicating with one of the girls, even had talked about meeting with her on the day of the murder. Eventually arrested on child porn charges. He's in prison 40 some years. He may get out. Um, what how deep did they look into him? I mean, this that to me, when I hear the story of planning to meet her the day that they were going that they died. um why no more on Keegan Klein? Does he have a rock solid alibi when we really truly look at it from an objective standpoint? Could he have talked to other people that are into, I don't know, child porn and that sort of stuff, which he clearly was, and said, hey, these girls are out there if you want to go meet them, it's another I don't know how the predator community works, but assuming maybe they talk like that. um how deep of a dive have they done into Keegan Klein to completely rule him out, in your opinion?
Well, they did a good deep dive, and obviously they were able to, charge him with a slew of child porn charges, which he's been convicted of and he's in jail for. But what's very interesting about Keegan Klein, of course, is you bring up the meeting that was trying to be coordinated through Anthony Schatz, which Anthony Schatz was, of course, his catfisher, his
Yep.
good-looking, strapping young persona that was communicating with all these young girls. But what I always found interesting on this was Keegan Klein, through Anthony Schatz, had communicated with another girl right after this incident. And a masked person showed up at that girl's residence right after the communications with Anthony Schatz. And to me, that's another thing, as you said, who all, so I don't think it was ever Keegan Klein. If, Keegan Klein is this gigantic, overweight,
Yeah.
almost looks disabled in terms of his physical capability, certainly not bridge guy. And so never did it cross, I don't think, anybody's mind that it was him per se, but was it somebody he communicated with? Remember, this is all salacious group of people that, trade these, you know, pornographic images like trading cards and
Yeah.
communicate and try to get more. And so was he, were other people privy to the Anthony Shots account information and this hookup? And it begs the question after what happened after this with, this girl that right after that communication saw this
What kind of
man,
investigating was
masked.
done on that masked man that showed up at the other girl's house?
Well, they did an investigation, but no, reached no conclusion that I ever read about. I No one was charged. And you remember Keegan Klein too. They were so convinced of somehow his involvement, probably through the Anthony Shots account. So whether he was there or not, again, somebody else, they got him out of jail. This is a huge, huge feat. You have to have everyone involved in this on the law enforcement spectrum, on the prosecution spectrum, because you are going, and I've done it before. That's how I know, to convince somebody basically to say you're unincarcerated for a day.
Mhm.
And all that that entails, if anything happens when they're out, if they escape, if they hurt somebody, anything like that, it's a big deal.
Mhm.
So they took him out again to you know comb the waterway, uh because Keegan Klein had made up all this information, which they had believed, which ended up being not true. But the bottom line is, I think they did a pretty good job investigating him, but I don't know if they got to the bottom of
Yeah.
everything because, again, they didn't utilize FBI forensic digital investigators, to my knowledge, on everything Keegan Klein had.
Gosh. Where do you think this goes from here? I mean, right now, looking, I thought he would be convicted just because of the way that the Delphi seem to be setting up the case. At this point, I don't really think he will be. I think there's enough reasonable doubt that a reasonable human being will go, yeah, I can't say for sure that it's Richard Allen. Let's say he does get off. Let's say he's set free after this. What happens in Delphi after that? Do they start looking again for somebody else, or do they just say, "Well, we think it was him and he got off"? How do you think the authorities? I mean, the community is going to handle it one way, the authorities are going to handle it another way. How do you think that all plays out after this if Richard Allen is found not guilty?
Well, as long as the same sheriff is in charge and the state police, their command does not change. That's exactly what they're going to do. Is option B.
Yeah,
Well, we had the right guy, and they screwed it up in the courtroom. But this is what I think. I think he will be convicted.
really.
Out here in the public, we cuss and discuss all of this, and we look with a fine tooth comb at information that was never allowed into evidence. The geofencing isn't coming in. The information about the belt, I didn't see that in there. The information about, well, we'll see. We haven't seen the defense's side of things. But essentially, a lot that we get to see out here isn't coming in there.
Sure.
And so, because of that, I think that they're going to say, they're going to believe that that bullet belonged to him.
Yeah.
I have huge reservations about that because it was shot through a gun, was the only way they could get the tool mark, which are the extractor and the
Yeah.
ejector, to match, right?
Pretty
If
weak
if
evidence
it
though to sentence someone for murder.
Oh, I know, but I think they'll do it. I
Yeah.
think they'll add it all together and they'll say, well, some people go in, some jurors unfortunately go in, and they truly believe law enforcement wouldn't ever go after anybody that wasn't
Yeah.
not guilty, and they have so much trust in law enforcement. So you have that factor working at you. And then you have the fact he was there. They're going to really drive home that van and make it seem like, I think, that no one knew about the van but him,
Hmm.
which isn't accurate. I think that they're going to focus in on the confessions. Um, I think the jurors will think, why in the world, crazy or not, in those conditions or not, because nobody's ever been in those conditions, why would anybody confess to something they didn't do? And I think that's going to be a big factor in this.
Yeah.
And then I think they're going to say that bullet was his. There's no reason for that bullet to be down by those bodies, but for him to have been there. And I think they're going to look at him, many jurors, and they're going to say, I think that's him because of the blue Carhartt jacket, the general appearance, right? Even though he looks like my dad, right? He
Yeah.
looks like any farmer. uh it's so nondescript,
Yeah.
that video. I think they'll convict him. I think we're going to see a conviction here. I actually don't even think it's going to take much time. In
Wow.
a sense, I hope I'm wrong, because I'm not convinced. If
Yeah.
I were convinced, but I can't
Yeah.
get convinced with.
Well, I'm hoping that there's more critical thinkers on the jury than not. That at the least this will end up in a mistrial. But I totally see where you're coming from. I could very well see it going exactly how you're saying. I'm going to go on the glass half full on this one and hope that because that there's more people who can think beyond just the basics of what they're seeing. I know a lot of people can't, but maybe I don't know. We'll find out. As of now, I've not been convinced that Richard Allen is this person. I've been convinced that the police just didn't do a very good job. Is where it's at for whatever reason. I don't even know. Think it was like a conspiracy of. I just think it's bad behavior or bad policing. Nobody wanted to be accountable for, and this is where we've end up. And still, everybody's got their lies up or their version of the story, and it's not going to go anywhere other than that. We'll probably end up be talking about this again about a year or two from now when trial number 2 starts. I'm hoping it ends. I'm hoping it ends, but
Maybe.
we'll find
And
out.
Tony, I will say in this case, it's a little different than some of the other cases that we've looked at from the standpoint of there was big motivation in this case because there was a sheriff's race
Hmm.
underway.
Yeah.
And there was big motivation to get this crime solved. It was kind of the
Yeah.
platform, that the person was running and espousing that, I'm going to get this crime solved and kind of
Yeah.
all about him, right? And so there was a lot at stake,
Yeah.
I think. And that's why I always said, did he confess to somebody else? What put their needle on
Yeah.
him again? I have been so disappointed that there was nothing.
Yeah.
It was simply that they supposedly re-looked at everything. That makes no sense to me.
No.
That there wasn't something larger, and it never came out.
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's scary when political motivations get into crime world and judging the innocence or guilt of someone. I mean, we're seeing it right now, and I'm not expressing an opinion on this. I mean, I'll express an opinion. I think the Menendez brothers should be out. I think they've served their time. But what you're seeing there is the DA is releasing them, and it looks very political. He's up for reelection, and he wants the support of being the guy who freed the Menendez brothers after all those years of abuse, which I think is the right move. But is it being done because it's the right thing to do, or is it being done because he wants to get votes? This almost was the exact opposite. People needed their villain, people needed their bad guy. The sheriff found the bad guy, and he wasn't going to hear anybody's arguments any other way. And now we're starting to hear about the arguments every other way and what was done incorrectly, which turns out it ultimately was to get elected, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, this is just one of those cases that has that, and it's a perfect analogy right now with Gascon and in
Yeah.
Los Angeles. He's up for reelection in
Yep.
December. What a feather in the cap! What something to drive home, especially when you have Hollywood behind you,
Yeah.
and all those huge platforms like the Kardashians that are begging for him to get out. And we've seen that needle move. It's unbelievable to me. I know you and I have a difference of opinion, but we can always discuss it
Yeah.
intelligently, which I like.
Yes, exactly.
I don't like you any less because you think they should get out, Tony.
Exactly. Yeah.
I still think you're a good dude.
Yeah.
Um, but again, if I could be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that they were sexually
Yeah.
abused, we know they were emotionally treated very harshly
Yeah.
and um, verbally.
Yeah.
There's just too much. Actually, I've been pouring back over in my spare time as I'm driving or whatever, been listening to the trial again.
Mm.
Believe it or not. I mean,
Yeah.
to the very key witnesses, and I tell you, the big problem is Lyle Menendez. I really think just orchestrated this
Mhm.
whole thing. And I had never known about the book, the book of all his recordings, and why he wasn't allowed on the stand the second time. I just didn't remember that.
Yeah.
1990 was a pretty busy time,
Sure.
90 through 94 for me. But um, you know, boy,
Yeah.
when you hear out of his own mouth him saying, devising this plot basically to use the sexual assault
Mhm.
excuse, it's way too much for me to overcome.
Sure. Sure. It's a lot of thoughts on that case. It's just disturbing when politicians use it to their advantage for election when we're talking about people's freedom, innocence, or guilt. And I feel like that was a big factor here in the Delphi case. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special
Tony,
agent. Yeah,
sorry, Tony,
yeah,
that is a great point.
yeah,
Politics should never weigh in one way or the other.
exactly. Yeah, 1000%. Jennifer Coffindaffer, retired FBI special agent. Thank you for joining us to talk in depth about this crazy case. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.